I'm Sean Hogan, Director of Instruction here at our Leadbetter World headquarters. I'm actually in my home office here, and I've got the wee Iceman behind me, Mr. Ben Hogan, and graciously joined today by Mark Sweeney and Brian Bailie, who have just been really a wealth of knowledge for us coaches around the country, giving seminars and of late a lot of webinars, guys, with the COVID-19. So we certainly, all of us at LGA, and I know Brian and Mark there, we all wish all of our clients, friends, and families safe passage. It looks like we're on the back end of this COVID-19, so hopefully we'll be back to getting out on the golf course regularly there, guys, and enjoying some beers and a good laugh after every round. And the weather obviously in Florida has been absolutely blissful. So yeah, we're looking forward to getting out. So today we wanted to share some thoughts about how you can improve your performance. I know, Brian, you're obviously based up there in Charlottesville. Amazing resume there. You're obviously working a lot of short game and putting, 17 years collegiate experience. That's phenomenal, working with both men's and women's programs, national assistant collegiate coach of the year in 2010, and obviously working, as I say, with a variety of players, just helping them improve their performances and using all the technologies available to you. Mark, founder of AimPoint, our partnership with you has been one we've been blessed with. We really feel like the collaboration of helping players understand how to read the putt, match the speed to the line has been fantastic. So your resume speaks for itself. 100 tour players, including 5 world #1s, and we had a nice collaboration there for a few years with Lydia Ko, so that was fun. Wow. And Golf Digest top 50 teacher in America, and I think you're the only guest we've had on that's also won an Emmy for in 2008 George Wenzel Technical Achievement Award for your AimPoint virtual putting line, which was shown on Golf Channel from 2007 to 2012. Gentlemen, welcome and thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having us. You know, Brian and I got started in this for a variety of reasons, but number one, because we had players, or I'll speak for myself, I had players who would come take a lesson, leave for a while, come back and say, well, I'm just not making enough putts, and I really didn't have enough information to understand really what that meant. You know, whether did they imagine they weren't having enough putts? Were they not hitting enough greens? Were they hitting greens too far away? And so what I realized with putting, and Brian, I'm sure with short game also, is that you have to understand the whole game to be able to understand each piece of the game. So I couldn't really understand a player's putting performance without understanding their approach accuracy and their short game accuracy. And I also didn't know what they were doing when they left me. So they would leave and go do God knows what and come back, and they might be better. They might have gone off the wrong direction. And so we created Gameforge to not only track what drills they were doing originally, but now also tie that to what they do when they're actually playing tournament golf and their actual performance when they're playing, and put those two pieces together. One of the biggest things I think we both realize is that there are some very standard benchmarks for playing golf at different levels that you need to know that we didn't know as coaches. And I've been coaching 10, 15 years. Brian's been coaching 20 years. And there's some things now that seem so obvious to us, but at the time we're like, we really don't know the answer to this question. And so we're going to spend today just running over some of those really basic ball striking, short game putting, kind of what levels those need to be at to perform at a different level of golf, whether it's a top junior or a college player or a tour player, kind of where those metrics need to be. So we're going to run through that pretty quickly and then take questions at the end. All right, Brian, do you have anything to add to that?
No, like Mark said, the genesis was this is just to provide answers. And, you know, I think there's a lot of softwares out there that are really good, that do a lot of really neat stuff, but we never felt we got the answer to the question we were asking. So we really tried to make Gameforge into something that provides you answers and a game plan on how to get better now instead of having to interpret information. So sit back and enjoy and learn a lot about performance here coming up.
Yeah, here we go. All right, so to start off, you know, one of the things that we've done is we really want to understand, what do players at different levels do? What is the average score? What are the winning scores? And I think we started with winning scores. And so this is a pretty neat chart. It just breaks out men's and women's golf, and it shows you the winner score in blue, the average winning score in blue per round, and the average overall score in orange per round. So at HJGA level, HJGA boys are winning about 2.5 shots under par per round. So over 3 rounds, that's 8 to 9 under par. By the time you go up to NCAA Division I, that increases by about a shot, and the winners are winning at about 12 under par. And by the time you get to PGA Tour, now we're over 4 rounds, but you've really got to be between 4 and 5 under par per round to win, which means 18 under, or 18 shots below the cut, believe it or not. So they're generating more and more birdies, and they're creating fewer and fewer bogeys as you progress through golf. And so, depending on what level you want to play, you really have to have a game plan to create that. How do you go 18 under over 4 rounds if you want to be a winner? And that's both PGA Tour and LPGA. If you look at the LPGA numbers on the right, they're very similar, where by the time you get to the pro level, the average player is shooting a little bit below par, and the winners are at on average 4.5 under, between 4 and 5 under per round for the whole tournament in order to win. So that's kind of our starting point. Brian, do you have anything to add to that?
No, and again, you got to understand that progression as the AJGA goes into the NCAA. What changes? Course difficulty, distances, and that expansion. So this is not a linear growth. You got to think conditions are changing and things are getting more difficult. But yeah, this is definitely, if you're an AJGA player, you want to win, this is what it takes. Next level. So these give you those stepping stones of what I need to do to have a chance to win.
And one of the things, Mark, just if I might interject, we had Hollis Stacy come out, obviously a multiple ladies US Open champion. And a couple of years ago, she spoke with our full-time juniors here at our Leadbetter Academy, and she said, hey, you want to make it out on tour, you got to be about a +6 at your course with obviously the slope rating factored in off those back tees. It was pretty impressive stuff, the way she equated it to, hey, you got to be shooting 65 to 67 every time you go out on a comfortable day.
Yeah, every time you go out.
Yeah.
Yes. Dovetailing into what y'all are saying, what Brian said, y'all can see the course length now, right? Did that come up?
Yes.
Okay, so this is how the course yardages change over time. So basically, as you go AJGA to college, it goes up by 2 to 250 yards, and then by the time you go to tour, it's going up by another 2 to 300 yards. So they're scoring better, but they're also scoring better on longer courses. So realize the PGA Tour is shooting 18 under to win on 73 on average, and the majors get up to 78, 7,900 yards. And the LPGA 6,500 yards average, and their majors get up to about 68 or 6,900 yards. So they're scoring better. They're making more birdies and fewer bogeys on longer and longer courses. So if you're shooting, averaging par in college at 6,200 yards, and you want to go play LPGA, a good test would be to go out and play 65, 6,600 yards and see if you can maintain the same scores or better. And that's something that people need to be very aware of. I think a lot of people are roughly aware of, yes, the courses get longer, but there's lots of very good college players who struggle on tour, and there's lots of good college players who go out to tour and they kill it. And course yardage and being prepared for that is one piece of it. There's other pieces that we'll get into, but that's certainly one piece that you have to be aware of.
At a recreational level, Mark, there, obviously we work with a lot of club golfers. I think one of the things for us is, as teachers, to make sure they equate their, say, 7-iron length a little bit to, the course setup. So maybe, average distance, what after totals around 220, 225 for the average male I saw last time on the Golf Foundation stats. And I think that yardage is probably more geared toward a high 5, certainly not more than low 6s, for most amateurs, in order to enjoy themselves.
Yeah, I actually did a study a few months ago where it said, here's the average approach shots from a PGA Tour player, and let's say their average approach shot is 135, 140 yards. And then you subtract out the driving distance for a club player who's hitting at 225, and what would the equivalent yardage be? And it's dramatically lower than what they play. So, if you wanted to play around like a tour player with the same approach yardages and you hit it even 250, you should be playing down about 6,500 yards. If you're hitting at 225, you're down in the low 6,000s for sure. So people are playing much longer courses than they should, and they don't maybe not understand why they can't play as well as tour players. Well, some of it's skill, but some of it is just it's not a fair fight. Somebody hitting a 250 playing 7,000 yards is like a tour player playing 8,500 yards. They hit a lot of short irons in, and if you play too long of a tee, you're not going to be hitting a lot of short irons in.
Right. Well, and it's a slightly off-track subject, but it's definitely something we have to consider as custodians of the game, professionals. The architects have to realize that the footprint these golf courses are being designed over aren't made for the players that play them more frequently, which is that 225 player, maybe up to 250 for a more seasoned amateur. So great stuff.
Yeah. All right. So now let's get kind of more into the meat of it. And this is a really cool graph that we just made recently that shows you, if you look at the bottom, this is your score range from 10 under par to 15 over par. And the blue line shows you on average how many birdies people are making when they shoot that score. The yellow line is how many bogeys they're making. And then we have this concept called noise, which is basically the net of eagles and doubles. So if you have 2 doubles in a round, that's 4 extra shots. If you have an eagle and no doubles, that's -2, which you see out here on the far left. But this gives you an idea, is if you're shooting kind of mid 70s and want to shoot scratch, your goal is really, 3 birdies and less than 2 bogeys. So you can kind of find the intersection here. Scratch doesn't happen at 2 bogeys and 2 birdies. It happens, more birdies than bogeys, because you've always got this noise factor, which is you're going to throw a double every once in a while. And so, if you want to look at your progression in golf, if you're an even par player and you want to shoot 4 under to win, you've got to get up in this 5 birdies per round and way less than 2 bogeys per round, 1 to 1.5 bogeys per round. And therefore your course strategy and your training has to revolve around that. But this gives you a really nice progression, even if you're shooting kind of mid 80s. One thing that I think is cool about this graph is that you'll notice the birdies line is very flat until you get to kind of mid 70s. Yes. Basically, when you're higher than mid 70s, you're really not generating many birdies because you don't have enough greens and other issues. So you're really focusing on getting the bogeys and the doubles out of your game until you get to the mid 70s, and then you'll see the birdies starting to pick up. Whereas with the bogeys, by the time you're shooting 4 or 5 under, they're kind of gone. You're having maybe less than 1 bogey per round, and the only way to go deeper is to get more and more and more birdies.
All right.
So kind of
and the lesson, and the lesson here, exactly. The lesson here, Brian, is I think in teaching amateurs, especially mid to high handicappers, guys, we have to get them making bigger mistakes. Minimize their mistakes. We're talking about this in some practices. A practice seminar a few weeks ago, is that they tend to compound their errors. They turn, a bogey into a double or a triple, and that creates a lot of noise on the scorecard. And it can be just a couple of poor decisions, perhaps, Mark. It may not necessarily be a technical issue, just taking on shots that maybe bring in too much risk and what have you. So I think for the higher handicapper, as you say, they might not have to make so many more birdies as just eliminate the noise on the scorecard.
Yeah, and Sean, to build off of that, inside of Gameforge, we like to talk about offense and defense. So there's the offensive mindset of I need to go under par, I need to make birdies, and there's the defensive mindset of I need to prevent bogeys, par saves. So definitely higher handicaps, kind of the design of training needs to be more defensive player. We've got to figure out how we can start pulling noise and bogeys out of the system is much more important than making birdies. But as we start to transition down, getting roughly, shooting 75 or so, there's definitely birdies really. So once we become a pretty good player, now we've got to start saying we've got to get much more offensive mindset. We got to start figuring out how to make more and more birdies. So I think a lot of players have that misconcept that they're trying to make more birdies when actually saving par is much more important. Short game hitting, getting irons better and things along that lines. So it's understanding offense and defense and understanding where they need to apply it to see the best gain quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and just for reference, tour players, PGA, LPGA players average between 1 and kind of 1.5 under par. So they're kind of right in this range. More than 3 bogeys. More than 3 birdies, less than 3 bogeys. But really our goal for tour players is to average 4 birdies and 2 or fewer bogeys. And that's a really good guideline if you want to play on tour. And then you can see the noise goes down to pretty close to zero because their doubles and their eagles are not totally washing out, but roughly washing out. In other words, they're not net losing a whole lot because of doubles, because they make up for some of them with eagles.
Yeah.
But they'll be a little bit positive there, but really the bulk of their scoring is coming from the 4 birdies and 2 bogeys, this kind of range here.
It was amazing in Tiger's run at #1, when you look at his scorecard at his various victories, how void his scorecard was of just noise and bogeys.
Yeah.
As you say, it might have only had 4 birdies on it. When I say only, that's 72 plus 100 yards, but he just, 1 bogey maybe over 2 days was just amazing how he eliminated bogeys. And so it didn't put so much pressure on him that he had to shoot 63 to make up ground. He just sort of had his 4 or 5 birdies per day and eliminated, a big number.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get up above 5 birdies. No matter how well you putt and hit the ball, it's hard to get much higher. I mean, people obviously do get much higher than that, but you're much more effective at that point, just not making mistakes to keep your score low.
Excellent.
All right, let's move on here. I need to get rid of this highlighter, I guess. Okay, so now let's talk about ball striking, which is really approach shots. And same sort of a graph here, but the orange line is your greens and regulation. So you see, even par average happens a little above 12 greens in regulation. And then tour players are usually between 12 and 13. Mm-hmm. And more importantly, the blue line is in position. So that's how many of those greens are hit 20 feet or closer. So the vast majority of all your birdies are going to come from in position approaches, meaning 20 feet and in. And what you'll see is there's roughly a 50-50 ratio. As you get to higher levels of golf, that ratio becomes more like 60% of greens are inside 20 feet. But you can see again, this is a very important metric, because if you hit 13 greens, but they're all at 30 feet, you're not going to make any birdies. So you've got to have a fair number of, what we call offense. Your opportunities for birdie are 20 feet in. Our goal is really 7 or more. So tour players are kind of right up in this range. PGA Tour is a little bit lower average because of course difficulty. College is actually a little bit higher because, again, the course length and the course difficulty is a little bit easier. But you really, if you want to get down to even par below, you really need to generate at least 7 opportunities per round, which are birdie putts inside 7 feet.
Yeah. And to me, goes back to our comment earlier. What distances should we be playing? Ideally, as an amateur, if you want to go have fun and actually compete and have a good day of golf, you've got to be able to play distances that allow you to hit 50% of your greens hit 20 feet and in, so you have birdie opportunities. If you're only giving yourself 1 or 2 opportunities inside of 20 feet, you're not going to make birdie. So again, kind of looping back to what we talked about earlier, to make the game more pleasurable and to actually be able to score, you got to play at a length that allows you to access these opportunities. Because again, all your birdies come from here.
Yeah, and you get around the course quite a bit faster. Kind of fun too.
Yeah. Well, and this is where driving distance can really be an advantage, because the closer your approach shot, the more likely you are to hit it inside 20 feet. And that's why par 5 scoring is so important, because that's one of your really good chances during a round to hit your approach inside 20 feet. If you go for the green, get it somewhere near the green, pitch on inside 20 feet, you're much more likely to have it in position there than you are on a par 3, for example. So you've got to really take advantage of that. And you have to design a strategy around, how do I get my 7+ in positions? I have to have them. And if I'm playing too conservative, you're not going to generate a whole lot of bogeys if you hit a lot of greens at 30 feet, but you're not going to go under par either. Right. So if you really want to be an under par player, you've got to balance hitting the green with also being aggressive enough to have your real 20 feet in probabilities. Opportunity.
And within that performance metric, one thing that amazed me was some years ago at Champions Gate, when we had the father-son, we've talked about this, Mark, we had a 9-time winner on the PGA Tour, Vijay Singh, out with a son for the event. And I went out, talked with him, filmed a few shots. I mean, he's the #1 player in the world. I think really the only player in the history of the PGA that actually went against a healthy Tiger, mano-a-mano, for a full calendar year. And Tiger won a measly 4 or 5 times. And Vijay won 8 or 9, I think it was 9 wins. But what was amazing was I asked him what defined his win that year, or his winning, percentage. And he said, I stopped worrying about hitting fairways. And then you fast forward 7 years later, because VJ was hitting it so long, he said, I'd rather have a wedge or a 9 or an 8 from the rough than be back with say a 5-6 iron in my hand in the fairway laying up. And then you fast forward 6-7 years later, and you've got a 125 and in wizard in Luke Donald, who captured the number. So it's interesting within that performance matrix. We're in a power game now. Par fives are being dominated. That's where these long hitters feast. As you say, they take opportunities on some of the other shorter holes where they might stiff one in there. But otherwise, you know, the Luke Donald year was phenomenal, that he was able to sort of, you know, carve out that, whatever it was, 85, 90 weeks as world number one. But his matrix inside 125 was amazing. I think a lot of amateurs could learn with that. I've spent some time with his coach, Pat Goss, up there at Northwestern, and he did a great job with him, maximizing Luke's potential as a player.
Yeah, I mean, the whole point of ball striking accuracy and distance is to create opportunities. I mean, why do you want to improve your swing? Why do you want to make a tighter dispersion? Why do you want to hit it farther? Because you need to create these opportunities. That's what it's all about, is to get your opportunities high enough that you can convert. So it's like, if you compare it to any sport, which we do all the time, you know, football, soccer, baseball, whatever, you know, football, your real opportunities are, you know, inside field goal range and inside the red zone. You know, the more of those you have per game, the more you're going to score. It's just a fact. And if you're never inside the field goal range, it's going to be really hard to score in football. So golf is the same. You've got to get inside that 20-foot circle as often as possible. And to play tour golf, you really got to be above 7. Starting point.
Yeah.
Brian, anything to add to that before we go on to?
No, sir. You guys nailed it.
All right. So scrambling. Sorry. There's 2 little overlays there. That's kind of where the pro level is at. Kind of up in this range.
Gotcha.
7 plus. Winners get up to kind of 9, 10 area and kind of 14, 15 greens typically. All right, scrambling. So scrambling here, we've got, again, 2 lines. The yellow line is your scrambling percentage, and even par happens at about 55% scrambling. So if you're missing 6 greens, they're getting up and down at least 3 of those 6 greens, and that's pretty good golf. If you're missing 8 greens and you're scrambling pretty well, you're going to make 4 bogeys, just a fact. And that's why greens and regulation are so important, because it reduces the number of bogeys you're going to make, because even the best players in the world don't scramble a whole lot better than 60% on average. They certainly have rounds where they're at 80, 90, 100%, but on average, 50 to 60 is kind of pro level scrambling. And what really drives that scrambling number primarily is what we call P6, which is how often you hit it inside 6 feet after you've missed the green in regulation. So you see it, you know, up until you get to, you know, mid to low 70s, the P6 number and the scrambling kind of mirror each other, which means if you're scrambling at 25%, you're probably not hitting it inside 6 feet very often after you miss the green. And that's partially a wedge accuracy issue, but it also might be issues like just making bad decisions on recovery shots where you just cannot get to that circle because you're behind a bush or behind a tree, or you've had compounding mistakes or something. But the interesting thing, again, at the pro level here, you know, they're operating down this level. The scrambling is better than the P6, which means they're saving par more often from outside that 6-foot ring. So their putting gets better. And so even if they're only hitting it inside 6 feet, 50% of the time, they can still scramble at 60+% of the time.
Yeah, it's such a huge number. That drop off between 5 and 6 feet, you start to get to 7 or 8. Boy, that's it's like just it's like a cliff there. So, and it also speaks to our amateur players, where I find most golf schools, if they can be very confident inside 5 feet or less, it just takes a lot of pressure off their chipping and their lag putting. You know, just be very good inside 5 feet, and that's a great starting point.
Yeah, and the 6-foot circle, you know, Brian, you can talk about this actually, because you described it really well.
Yeah, to me, the 6-foot circle it sounds pretty easy. You know, it's 6 foot, so it's a 12-foot diameter around the hole. Can I get my chip shots in that? Well, if you're chipping from the fringe, 0 to 10 feet, you should be averaging 3 feet, give or take. But as we start adding distance and we start adding different lie conditions, that 6-foot circle or that 12-foot circle gets really, really tight. the best in the world average 3 feet and in, basically 2 lie conditions, fringe 0 to 10, 10 to 20. That's the only time they average roughly 3 feet. Everything outside of that is between basically 4 and 8 feet, give or take. So 6 feet is kind of that ring in the center. And we say that no matter lie condition distance out to about 40 yards, you should get 50% of your shots inside of that 6 foot ring. And that's kind of a standard. So the most fascinating part about this is as a higher handicapper and I'm trying to move up, what's the most important, my scrambling percentage or my P6? By the chart, you can see you've got to train that proximity. That's more important than you making tons of putts between 7 and 12 feet. It's actually giving yourself more opportunities 6 feet and in, and then capitalizing on that. I was wrong for many years coaching. I'm a short game coach, and I blew this for many years. I tried to do the 3 foot circle, and I put demands on players that they just could not achieve. Because again, hit it to 3 feet, 90+% make rate, you're going to be a great short game player, but that you just can't access that 3 foot circle very often. So this has made me a better coach because I've made it easier on my players, but it's also brought reality to the player that if we can get it 6 feet and in more times than not, we have a chance to be a really good short game player. And again, that's playing defense. This is how we keep these rounds going, and this is how, as higher handicaps, how we improve quicker is getting better around the greens. And short game is definitely something anybody can learn and get much better at. So I would encourage for higher handicaps to start thinking in this mindset of this P6 number.
Excellent.
Yeah, and you have to realize most scrambling shots are 10 to 20 yards from the hole. They're not from the fringe, chipping it 15 feet. So if you really want to train this, you've got to go between 10 and 20 yards away from the hole, in the bunker, in the rough, in the fairway, and try to hit that 12-foot diameter circle. It's a lot harder than you think, and the sooner you train that as a junior or a college player, the more prepared you'll be for tour golf if you want to go to that level.
Excellent.
All right. So the third point of the triangle here, putting, and there's lots of different putting stats we can look at, but we'll just look at some very indicative ones, which is total putts and 3 putts. And total putts gets a bad rap from a lot of people, and I used to be one of those people who said, well, total putts is not great because it depends how many greens you hit and blah, blah, blah. Well, it turns out statistically that total putts is the single best predictor of score of all the metrics out there. It's better than greens, it's better than driving distance, it's better than proximity, better than everything, because total putts touches all areas of your game. It reflects how accurate your approach shots are. It reflects how accurate your scrambling shots are. It reflects your speed control, your obviously your putting accuracy. So it kind of touches everything. And we had this verified, the University of Virginia data science team did analysis, and they came up with the same results we did, which was total putts was the best predictor of score. So I used to never look at it. Now I look at it a lot. But what you see from this graph is that, scratch happens at about 30 putts per round. Everybody on all the tours out there are averaging below 30 putts a round. So kind of in that kind of 1 under range that we talked about earlier, this is where you see all your tour averages. And your 3 putts on tour average less than 0.5, meaning they're only 3 putting once every 2 rounds, whereas college tends to be between 1 and 2 3 putts per round, which are kind of up in this range. And then higher handicaps average close to 3 putts a round, kind of up in this range. So the thing you have to realize about putts is you can't just improve your putting by practicing putting. Okay, total putts and 3 putts are also a factor of approach proximities. If all your approaches are at 35 feet, you're going to have a lot of putts and you're going to have a lot of 3 putts. So you can't look at putts in isolation. You've got to look at the whole package of approach accuracy, which is where I struggled pre-Gameforge. I didn't know somebody's approach accuracy, so I didn't know whether 2 3 putts around was good or bad. Well, if they're hitting it inside 20 feet, it's bad. If they're hitting it outside 40 feet, it's expected. So I had to tie all those pieces together to understand putting better. 3 putts is not just speed, control, and read. It's also, if you're putting from 40 plus feet, you are going to 3 putt. Not every time, but you're going to have, your fair share of 3 putts. Just no way around it. Brian?
No, I agree. So the beauty of golf is it's a very complex game, but we're starting to understand it in a more simplistic way, how all the pieces tie together. So a good 3-putt training session is actually working on ball striking and then working on maybe some long putts, but now making putts inside of 6 feet, that becomes huge because the majority of your leagues should be 6 feet and in. So just working on distance control is not fixing 3 putting. Fixing 3 putting is now I got to make that second putt, but also if I can basically not put myself in those positions with ball striking. So again, it's just a different way of thinking, and you've got to understand how these pieces are interconnected. Because kind of like Mark said, you just can't sit out there at 40 and 50 feet and expect not to 3-putt anymore. It's just, you know, the numbers don't show that. So improvement is actually getting better in multiple areas. And again, a good coach and will definitely be able to help you reach that.
Yeah. You know, on average, even a tour player, half of their greens that they hit are going to be outside 20 feet and half inside 20 feet. So if you're not practicing putting outside 20 feet, if you're hitting 14 greens, typically 7 of them are going to be longer than 20-foot putts and 7 will be inside 20 feet. So you've got to practice that range. And if people, you know, spend too much time on 3-footers and 10-footers, you know, you're neglecting the fact that you're going to have a lot of 20 to 40-foot putts, and you got to practice those.
Yeah, I think especially for the amateurs we work with is to look, you know, have a clear, concise, if you will, capture of their game, how far they hit their driver, how far they hit their 7 as some baselines, what the makeup in their bag is. And then, as you say, optimize, as we talked about earlier, Brian, the length of the course they're playing. So try to get that match to your point, Mark, as well, so they're having comfortable shots into greens and they can set up, as you can say, closer proximity to the hole. But that's really key. I think if players can sort of match that length, give themselves better opportunities coming in, as you say, not as many 50-footers per round, and but there's definitely a correlation there, as you say. If you're putting from 40 feet on every green, you're going to have your fair share of 3-putts.
Yeah, and that might be ball striking, but also might be targeting. You know, if you're being too conservative and going middle of the green all day long, that's only going to get you so far. You know, yes, you are reducing bogeys, but you're not starting to generate birdies, so that you do need to come at some point, especially if you're 150 and in, you've got to count your in positions. And if you're not hitting 7, it's either a ball striking issue or a targeting issue. Right. It's got to be addressed if you want to play high level golf. Okay, let's move on here. Brian, should we go through this, or should we, maybe I'll do this quickly and then make sure we
just touch on it quickly, and then we got a couple minutes.
Okay, so the inside Gameforge is called our GFI, or Gameforge Index, and it basically breaks out your game between ball striking, putting conversions, short game. There's a overall putt section and par 5 scoring. And the idea is, this is a tour player. His average score is 2 under par, and that's where this gray dotted line is. And the idea is, any bar that's to the left of 2 under par means he's performing better than a 2 under par player. And any bar that's to the right of 2 under par means he's performing worse than a 2 under par player. So it's really a tug of war. His score is a balancing act between the left side and the right side. So to improve a player, you want to basically take things that are to the right and push them more to the left. So this particular player, you can see his ball striking block up here, everything's good. He's a top 10 in the world player, and interestingly enough, his fairways are, he hits the same fairways as somebody who's shooting 78. You know, but fairways is a very.
He's hitting it a country mile.
He's hitting it long, yes. But the interesting thing about top 10 players is they hit fewer fairways on average than your average tour player. So their fairways tend to be low, but he's still generating. Remember, we want more than 7 in positions. He's generating almost 8 in positions around on PGA Tour, which is good on PGA Tour. So he's getting the job done. He's creating his opportunities, even though he's not hitting a lot of fairways. So the ball striking, we're fine with. Let's just jump down to the short game first. His P6, we want 50% or better. He's at 51%, so that's good. His scrambling averages 65%, 64%, really good. And then if we look at his conversion, so this is how many putts he makes. So the biggest gap he has, his EG conversions is putts that he makes 20 to 40 feet. He makes 20% of those on average. Now think about how good putting that is. If you drop 10 putts between 20 and 40 feet, could you make 2 out of 10? Probably not. Tour average on is about 10%. So he's double tour average on long putting. His putts between 9 and 20 feet in position is about tour average, about 30% is what we're looking for. Junior golf is usually less than 20%. College golf gets up to 20, mid-20s, and then by tour, you've got to be at 30 or higher, really, to stay on tour. His big gap is here. So his blackjack conversions, that's how many putts he makes inside 8 feet. So his number one weakness is that when he has a birdie putt inside 8 feet, he's not making enough of them. And so that is an area we go to very quickly to improve, because everything else is pretty darn strong.
Yeah.
200 par average is top 10 in the world player, shoots about 200 average, but not a whole lot better than that. So he's already a top 10. So really, there's not a whole lot of room for improvement other than really those short putts.
Right.
And
amazing.
And the neat thing about the GFI and the system is this is a top 10 player in the world. So we'll flex out up to 15 over par. So basically anybody 90 can, anyone averaging 90 and better, it will show up in the index. But really what it does is it gives you a true look at what your game is. So the beauty of Gameforge, it doesn't tell you how to do it. It just says, here are your numbers. The next level looks like this. Let's go ahead and sit down and figure out where the low-hanging fruit is. Where can I make improvements quickly to reach my next level? So I think that what the GFI gives you is a really good overview for what you do and where do we need to go to reach your next level of golf. We're not comparing you to the tour. We're not comparing you to different groups. We have the option if you want to compare yourself that way, but really it's about you and how you can get better. And I think this is where Gameforge is much different than a lot of other programs out there. It's really designed to get you better faster. And that's really kind of a credo inside of that we talk about all the time with coaches, is knowing what you do and how to move that. And like I said, with the ability to track it in each piece in relationship to par, it just allows you to zoom in immediately and go, I can get better here in the next 7 days, 14 days, 3 months, whatever that is. And it just gives you ownership of your game, which is, as a golfer, we all want that.
Well, and as you, Jen, say, one of your mottos there, learning your scoring DNA, and you've got the decimal in there 0. So you're either, why are things trending to the right of that, causing score to go up, and what can we do to move them, as Mark said, to the left of that? So it's nice you got even par in there. And I think for most players, certainly the higher level players that may not have much time on their hands, just championing, Brian, maybe like that one low hanging fruit each year. It might be one, maybe maximum 2 things in their string, but generally one aspect of the game. If they can improve that one aspect, and as Mark was saying, it can have that trickle down effect where they end up with better proximity on recoveries, better proximity on approaches, and all of a sudden there's that cascade effect where the score comes down pretty quickly, because we're so emotional as golfers. You come in and you feel like, well, I felt my potential score was 6-8 shots better, but it's more of an emotion. And I think what Gameforge does is it brings clarity, as you, Jen, say, to a complex game, because there's so many facets over the course of 4.5, 5 hours out there during the round, whether it's for a tour player or you're playing in your club championship and what have you, and you're just trying to, eke out the lowest score possible. So I think having that clarity, as you say, is huge.
Yeah, just as a side, his 3 putts is probably the lowest I've ever seen at point. He basically makes 3 putts once every 4 rounds on PGA Tour. So his 1 3-putt a tournament on PGA Tour average. That's tour average is about 0.5. So he's a very good long putter. He just needs a little work on short putts.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna skip a few things here because we're almost out. But trends is really important. One of the most important reasons to track trends is because we want to see motion and we want to see movement. If you're a player and a coach and you're trying to get a player to score better, and you're not monitoring that month to month over time, it's really hard to tell, frankly. So this is a score trend for another PGA Tour player over all of last year, and you can see he went in January. He went from very low score to going. Late spring was averaging well over par, which is really hard to survive on tour. And they made some sort of change, he and his swing coach, and you can see his trend went down, 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 all the way to the end of the year. And he actually won at the end of the year, beginning of the year in January, he won a tournament. So the important thing about trends is, A, it shows you whether what you're doing is being effective or not. And B, it prevents you from getting too reactive to a single round or a single tournament. It's very easy to have one bad round and freak out and say we need to change everything. And I've certainly seen a lot of players do that. But as a coach, I always go back and say, listen, the trend's going the right direction. Let's just stay on the path. Everybody's got variance in round to round, and you just can't overreact to any individual round or even an individual tournament. You've got to be looking long term. Are these lines moving the correct direction?
Got it.
this is the same player just to show you. So his score was driven by his in positions. This is how many times per round he was inside 20 feet on average. And you can see it's basically a mirror opposite of his score. So this is what drove the change in score, is he was down at 4 or 5 in positions around, which you can't survive on tour with that. And he went up, all the way up to 10, which is super high. So whatever they were doing obviously was very effective and just continued to get better and better over time. This is typically the kind of trend we see, is that it's a long-term trend. It doesn't just turn on one day and you're perfect after that. It's usually growth, and then that's usually at the end of something like that is where you see a player win.
All right, just building that confidence over time, right?
Yeah, and it also prevents him. August, he had a little bit of a weak month in August. You don't freak out about even 1 week month, a couple tournaments in there. You keep on it. If it kept going down in September, I'd be worried, but it didn't. It blipped down and then kept going. So again, that's something very important to keep aware of as a player, is your long-term trends. A lot of skills in golf, you're not gonna change in a week or 2 weeks or even a month. A lot of them are going to take multiple months to really get where you need them. And so if you're not tracking that over time, sometimes it's really hard to tell if you're actually necessarily improving or not.
Yeah.
And to kind of build off of that, I had a player last year, plays professionally. Her score to par was staying relatively the same, but she kept commenting, "I'm working harder to shoot my numbers." So we were able to go back into trends, and what we saw was her putting growth was getting better. She was making more and more birdie putts, which is that was our big point of emphasis. We got to get better here. But what we started to see is her in position numbers started to drop. So even though she was improving in putting, she was having less opportunities. So the two kind of weighed each other out, and that was her feeling of, I'm working harder to make these scores, where she's having to make putts because she had less opportunities. She went and saw her swing coach. They worked on a couple of things, and now her putting kept getting better and her trends getting better, and she had a great end of the season push. So trends are really good at just showing you how things are moving. Hopefully you can catch things before they go haywire, but more so they just tell you, are you getting better? If you're flat or if you got a negative inflection, that tells me whatever we're doing is not working. We need to figure out how to get you better. So again, these trends just show you pathways and an understanding of where I need to improve.
Yeah. Awesome.
Cool. Should we take questions now? I definitely want to leave room for questions. There's other stuff in here, but I think we can skip it and just go right to questions, and then.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, for all our listeners, coaches, and golfers included, I think one of the things we've enjoyed at the Leadbetter Academy there, guys, is the fact that with Gameforge, our students there, one of the questions was directed at input. How is all the data captured? Now, obviously, the thing we like about the Gameforge system for our students, Mark, is that it's about 60 to 90 seconds of data entry. And over the course of 6, 8, 12 rounds, you start to see the DNA of the golfer you're working with, or for feedback for the golfer to give to his coach. So you just want to speak to sort of the data capture and input?
Yeah, I mean, the only data we require after each round is it's about 20 total metrics that we saw on that last graph with the bars on it. So in addition to score, birdies, bogeys, doubles, things like that, there's only about 15 numbers we need to really get a profile. So we don't need every shot, we don't need every hole. We need things like how many greens, how many in positions, how many putts, par 5 scoring, penalties. So it's a very, very fast data entry to give you a very accurate profile of your game. And we found that, when we look at it and profile players off it, we can understand their game at a surprisingly high level of accuracy, having never watched them play golf before. I think we surprise a lot of people when we say, what do you see? And we say, well, here's what we see in your game. But like, yeah, that's exactly what this player does. So you don't have to spend 20 minutes around putting in data, because none of my players ever did that before. Not a single one. I couldn't get anybody to keep stats because it took so long. And so that was and I didn't keep stats either because I didn't want to spend all that time.
Right.
So that was one of the genesis of this, is Brian and I were like, what's the minimum amount of information we need to get a profile on you? And that's what our data entry is built around.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and that sort of ties in a lot of the questions are directed toward, how can it help the average golfer? Where do they go? I can see it up on the screen. Obviously, mygameforge.com is their landing spot there, and then they can log in and create an account. And you know, obviously there's some templates there to show them how to fill out the data and what have you. You want to elaborate on that, Brian?
Yeah, mygameforge.com. Anybody that signs up gets a free 30 days to try the system out. We just want you to be able to see what we can do to help you. Yeah, we have a tutorial video. We did a webinar a few weeks back for a bunch of college players, and we made that free. So it actually walks you through. It's a video about 40 minutes. It'll walk you through data entry, what we're measuring, why we're measuring, and gives you a really good understanding of what the system does for you. Like I said, it can help any handicap. It'll show you strengths and weaknesses and just start giving you that idea. If my goal is to become a better golfer, if I want to score better, it'll just give you that pathway to help you reach that number. Instead of working on the fringes, sometimes maybe working on a skill that might make me 1% better. If there's another skill a little bit down that I can work on and it'll make me 20% better, it's better to be spending my time there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got Mark, what, over 2,000 drills and exercises in any one area that is showing up, say, weak, and the player needs, obviously, you know, maybe some drills and exercise they can do when they get to the range or training facility, which is neat because then that way they're targeting that, as you say, that area of improvement.
Yeah, Sean, you're a much better salesman than we are. Yes, we have a we have our AI that will actually look at your scoring DNA, your GFI, and we'll start assigning drills off of need to help you get better. So there's a coach inside the system that'll start giving you drills to help you move your score as well. So yeah, there's a lots inside of there. Yeah, we're gonna put him on retainer, Mark.
Yeah, but it's nice. As I say, I like the fact that there's a line there. Everything trending to the left of it, from my view here, is obviously positive. Everything trending this way, you look at the biggest bars and you get after them. And as you say, there could be a cascade effect there. You work on one thing and it fixes another two. Another question here, James. I coach all types of players from mid to high handicap, but they struggle to get their putting average down. What would be the best way to get their putting average down? Thanks, James.
Putting averages terms of total putts, or?
I'm guessing total putts. So member has 32, 33 putts, say.
Typically at that level, you start with 3 putts. You know, mid to high handicaps, 3 putts is driving a lot of it. You know, most of them are having 2 to 3 putts around.
Right.
You know, in addition to obviously working on ball striking, actually, there's only so much you can do there with higher handicaps. Spend a lot of time kind of 20 to 40 feet, speed control, getting them to overread putts. You know, I do a lot of, on all my long putting, lag putting drills. You know, we're trying to get good speed, which is long or short is fine, as long as it's within about 10% of the length of the putt. So if you have a 50-foot putt, hitting it to 5 feet is perfectly reasonable. That's what they do on tour on average. But also, you know, a big piece of that is making sure they read plenty of break. If you're under reading those putts, you got no chance. So we do drills that get them, you know, we use Express obviously, so it's a lot easier to get them playing enough break, but we always get them kind of playing extra break and coming in really high and soft towards the top of the hole and never really letting them get much below the hole at all.
Yeah, speed control, really key. And obviously the read going a little bit higher, as it always has a chance when it's above the hole coming in rather than once it gets below it.
Yeah.
Paolo, can a coach see or get access to the stats for their students on Gameforge? Well, I can say yes. I'll let you gents obviously elaborate on that.
Yeah, definitely. It's like a big database. So you can invite the players in the system, or the player can invite you in as a coach. Either way, once that invitation's been accepted, either direction, it's a big database, and you'll be able to access any component of the player. You can even put the rounds in. As a coach, I'd encourage you not to do that, because once you start it, you'll never stop. But again, it gives you that flexibility to see everything. And then if you have big junior programs, there's ways you can actually compare player to player, player to benchmark. So there's definitely tons of ability in there to quantify your groups however you want to do it. So yes, definitely everything you see the player sees, and vice versa. We want that partnership with player coach, so you guys both are pulling in the same direction and getting to the same point.
Yeah, fantastic. A final one here, Gregory. How many rounds do you need to input before analysis is generated?
The analysis generates immediately on the first round, but I usually don't really trust it till you get to about 10 rounds. So we'd like to see 8 to 10 rounds before you start seeing a real reliable average. You know, one round could spike either direction, really good or really bad. So we really encourage people to get 10 rounds in before we really take a hard look at it and start assuming that those are statistically valid averages.
No,
Yeah.
I agree. It definitely, if it's too little, we're going to get big spikes and we might focus on the wrong point. But really about eight would be the minimum. You really see the GFI start to level out and you can really start making really good decisions. And the beauty of the system too is you can backdate any rounds in the system. So, you know, if you were able to play pre-corona and you had some data from a different software or stuff that you keep and you can backfill in, that would work great as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think probably, you know, since my first time keeping stats at USF when I played there, in a little booklet, you know, fairways hit, greens hit, up, how many up and downs out of. What was amazing is how it's evolved. You look at the shot link stats, obviously on tour, but even at the recreational level, having something like this, you input it for 60 seconds, 90 seconds, and as you say, you can sleep on it. 6, 8, 10 rounds later, you're able to get with a coach and clearly see the patterns. The other thing I would say is probably something we may look at down the road as well is when you're at that elite level, one thing we've noticed is, especially for juniors, where their hydration and nutrition, those intangibles that aren't necessarily reflected either on the scorecard or in their stats, you see them when they get nervous, perhaps on the back nine, not taking on some carbohydrates or hydration, and all of a sudden the legs get a little weak, and it just can lead to those little things, the sort of the unseen in the performance that ultimately does show up in the data. But it's some of those interesting things that you can look at a player and say, hey, you know, your back nine, your front line looks great, your back nine is always a little bit shaky there. So those are things as coaches, I think, that we obviously want to take into account there. Any closing thoughts on what you feel the success after what, a pizza and a beer 5.5 years ago and coming up with Gameforge?
Well, I think
Mark.
we'll both say that it's completely changed us as coaches. You know, we've got about 50 D1 teams in there. We got players on every tour using it, and just being able to look at it all. Like, I don't know how I coached before this, frankly, because I didn't have enough information. A player would show up and say, well, I didn't make enough putts. And we say, okay, well, let's have a look, you know, and it was just kind of shooting in the dark, you know, whereas now I can look at their profile before they show up and say, you know, we've got to work on your putts from 0 to 8 feet. Done. I know that because I can see all your trends and I see what you're doing, and that's preventing you from scoring better. So it's made me a tremendously more effective coach. Brian, what do you think?
I hit that exactly like Mark. I coached for 20 years collegiately, and I'm a much better coach today than I was then, and I wish I could go back and fix a couple things. But Mark, if you can go back one slide, for everyone that hung around, we'll give you one good piece of information if you want to take this out. Here's kind of our minimum standard. So if I'm an amateur, here's some goals that I really want to reach. And if you can do this as a junior getting ready to go play college golf, if you can hit these numbers by your freshman year, you're going to make a lot of traveling teams. And kind of what we say, at least 50% of my greens in regulation need to be 20 feet and in. So if I average 10 greens, I need to get at least 5 of those 20 feet and in. That's kind of our minimum standard. As we get better, that number grows, of course. Of my 50% of impositions, I need a whole 50% of those for birdie. So what we can start to see is this is our kind of that how everything's intertwined. So now I make 50% of my birdies, and then we say at least 50% of my scrambles have to be made. So we call it the 50-50 rule. It just makes it really simple. So when you're training and I'm hitting different shots, again, kind of thinking, am I hitting 50% of my greens 20 feet and am I making my birdies? Am I actually scrambling at 50%? Like I said, if we can hit these numbers, you'll be a really, really good amateur player. And then as you start getting closer to this, we're going to change our goals. We'll go to 60% to play professionally. So I think this nugget right here, you take away, you start training with this mindset, you'll become a much better golfer than just kind of being in the woods and just hitting a bunch of shots. This actually will give you a little, it's really simple to remember, and it gives you a little definition on how and clarity on how to get there.
Fantastic. Mark, Brian, honestly, can't thank you guys enough. I know as teachers, look, it's hard for us to be everything and all things to our students. I know as a coach, you know, there's so many good platforms out there, but certainly the AimPoint and the Gameforge platform for us as coaches, you guys have done an amazing job around the globe, and we sincerely appreciate your passion and the fact that you're sharing so much great information with our players and our coaches to help us get better. And so, hey, let's continue the journey. And as I say, wishing your clients, our clients, a safe passage through this COVID-19. As I say, it looks like we're on the backside of it. And if anybody obviously wants to visit Leadbetter University, we have some great online lesson packages there, as well as some great instructional certification courses that any of the instructors want to sign up for. So, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure, and hey, we look forward to seeing you out in the sunshine, not in the not too distant future.
Great, thanks, Tom.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.